Hello and welcome back to Be Sustainable. I still joined today by Adrian Tagg from the University of Reading. He's the lead on building surveying there and an active researcher in the field of accessibility within the built environment. Adrian, thank you for joining us today. Welcome.
You're welcome.
What I'd like to talk about a little bit, we've talked in a previous episode about your findings and what that tells us about where the built environment sector is in terms of providing access and inclusivity through its development. What I'm interested in talking about today is your sort of research journey to a certain extent. From talking to you before, this is an area that is very emotive, rightly so, that there are stakeholder groups who are enormously passionate about the issues of a lack of accessibility or a lack of inclusivity. Does that make it a difficult area to research, or does it make it easy to gather evidence and difficult to produce a view?
Yes, so just going back to my research journey, started nearly 30 years ago on this.
Right.
So as a graduate surveyor, the DDA was in force, so the Disability Discrimination Act. I thought it would be the most amazing piece of legislation. And as a graduate, we were working hard and fast to make money in commercial property. But when we got the opportunity to do access audits, and it felt like you were giving something back to society, it felt like you were doing some good rather than just making money for a client and investor. So that was the very start of my journey. And then I mentioned before the experiential understanding, looking after someone in a wheelchair and trying to get access. And just the basics like crossing a road, thinking this has to be different. There has to be a better way to do this. And these things shaped my own kind of feeling on trying to make change or deliver something that could affect change. Then obviously later on in life becoming an academic and having the opportunity to work with other academics and research really opened my eyes to the possibility of doing some research and actually making a difference. So that was the start of the journey. And then the challenge it's a huge challenge to formulate a research. Yes, there's a lot of stuff out there, but it's trying to sort of focus, drill down to what is important and devise a research strategy. And the first stream was very much to look at both public awareness, so public attitudes, and then commercial attitudes to see whether there was an alignment. So it's a challenge, and then drilling that further down into disability-specific requirements is the second part of the research. So I think that's answered the first part of the question, I hope, anyway.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And this is clearly something born of passion for it, which I suppose inevitably helps with the motivation for it. How did you find working with the interest groups, with the charities and the representatives of disabled groups and so on as part of this work?
Extremely insightful. It really is. I mean, obviously, the problem, I suppose, is people with a long-term physical and mental impairment who can't get access something. They're really despondent. Despondent or angry. It's kind of, it's not, it's quite a difficult situation. So bringing them on, getting them on board with research and as I say, they say, well, you're not disabled, what do you know? It's very much of that experiential understanding. So, but it has been extremely insightful, and I'm extremely grateful for a number of great charities who really helped me with the research, the primary research questionnaires, getting their organisations and the people they represent to get involved. So that was very, very. It felt very good, and I'm glad I got some tangible results from the process. So yeah, the first part was quite difficult by virtue that we were in the middle of a COVID, a lockdown. I began the research in 2019, obviously lockdowns in 2020. And it was a bit disappointing that the first research landed in the middle of COVID. And it is so when a tree falls at an empty forest, it doesn't make a sound. The good news is it's still available on your website, so people can still access the first report, the Harold Samley Research Prize report, and they can see the findings of both commercial and public attitude towards disability, and that shaped really the second research. The good news is both public and commercial world are aware of legislation. They're aware of the need to facilitate access to goods and services, but less so on how to do it, I would say.
Okay. as I said, this is something that you are clearly very passionate about, and everybody you would have engaged with in your research around this enormously passionate, some angry, some despondent, but very committed to this. Do you feel that the work that you're doing is gaining traction within the RICS and within the industry, or is it one of many voices shouting for some kind of response?
Gaining traction, maybe. There are a number of people working in this field, and maybe we're not joined up as we should be. Maybe there's a possibility to work with other people. Of course, there are lots of really big issues on the built environment horizon. Sustainability being a huge issue. So it's perhaps given the less importance. I feel like I'm really just at the start of this. I want to push it. I want to try and help facilitate change, help make change. So it's showcasing the research and the findings as much as possible to organisations. As I say, I often go out to industry, really happy to meet with anyone, present to anyone, can be lunchtimes, evenings, showcasing the research findings and showing where their organisations sit in influencing design, investors, building owners. It's quite important. And I deliver a number of CPDs in other subject areas, but this is the nice one. This is one that isn't always at technical staff. You could have in the same room admin staff, support staff, people in the office, because disability affects almost everyone in some way, a relative or a friend or an elderly relative. So you get some of the best discussion from those who aren't surveyors and involved in the built environment, but they're part of the process. So it's just making it, it's just showcasing that to a broad audience. So hopefully this podcast will do that as well.
Yeah, hopefully so. Yeah, I mean, this is it's a real life, real world issue. As you say, it's not a technical thing. It's actually something that it's very human.
Oh, of course, absolutely. Yeah, it's it knows no boundaries.
Yeah,
rich, poor, race, culture. It's honest. Disability crosses all spectrums. Yeah. So it's a universal thing. And I would always have said that the UK is quite a proactive approach, which is good compared to some other countries in the world. But having said that, I do feel like progress has stagnated, definitely, in the last, I'd say, 10 to 15 years, probably, halfway.
And this is probably an unfair question, given that if there was an easy answer, we'd have done it. But what does the industry need to give it the impetus to move beyond stagnation, to get it flowing again?
I suspect it's like everything, every project, it's all about money. It's going to cost money to make change, it's going to cost money to facilitate access, but it's looking slightly beyond there, the cost and benefit. So the initial cost might seem high, but the long-term benefit is very good. So I think if you can, get over the hurdle at the start, the front end, the long-term benefit is going to be very good, not just for individuals and businesses, but also for society as a whole. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's just like a shift, so that it's just acceptable. It's just totally the norm that we can access everything, and it's finding a way to get that, recognising the challenge of different buildings and old buildings, and the compromise needed.
And so, after 2 significant pieces of research and a book, what next? What are your ambitions for research and for yourself in this field?
Got a lot going on. I'm a busy person. There's always in the back of my mind, there's always something I'm thinking about. So I suppose maybe developing another research. I'm keen to look at that. What I'm keen to look at is, I've only looked at the building side. Okay, so accessing the building, the physical access of a building. There's so much more nuance on service provision. So, for service providers to understand the needs of those with disability. So what does a hairdresser have to do for clients who are disabled? What does a shop, the difference, the diverse spectrum of, commercial use, and also the diversity of disability. So I think that's an interesting way, because once we know that we can access buildings, the physical access, and the challenges and problems with actual gaining access, what are the soft challenges, the soft skills, if you like, of delivering service? We can say someone in a wheelchair can access a supermarket, but if they're accessing a sort of a deli counter where the lighting's too low and they can't see through the glass, that's a service provision issue.
Yeah.
So my focus has always been on buildings, but I think there has to be an approach from the service provider's side too, and that's probably quite an interesting thing to research. Getting the charities on board would be wonderful from that perspective.
Yeah, and I suppose that through that kind of activity, that's about raising the bar. So the minimum is get in the building. The next level is to have a satisfactory experience or a positive experience from being able to use the services within the building, and it's moving the threshold all the time about what is acceptable and where the compromise should get us to.
Yeah, it's not seeking the path of least resistance. It's not seeking the minimum. And that's a problem with legislation and checklists and things. They always have a minimum requirement.
Yeah.
And equally, for those with physical or mental impairment, recognising that I've got the bar is high for them, but it's not always possible to do that in terms of there has to be a compromise. And I actually think the service provision side is probably quite easy to educate compared to, in terms of cost and stuff, compared to actually making physical changes to a building can be quite dramatic in terms of cost and complexity.
Yeah.
So it's finding somewhere, and that fascinates me, and overall being able to contribute to making a difference is really important. And that's something I give the impression to all of my students, is saying, well, you're with me. We do an elective module in inclusive environments. It's got quite good uptake. Is saying to them, moving forward as graduates, if you can make the slightest bit of advice to a client or investor that makes an above legal minimum change, then you've done a positive thing. For me, that's really important.
Yeah, that feels like a good point to end this conversation. I'm very positive. It sounds like there's plenty out there for you to keep doing, keep you busy for many years to come, and hopefully we'll be able to get you back in and we can talk about it again in the future.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Adrian. So that's the end of that brief conversation around researching in the field of accessibility and inclusivity in the built environment. I hope you'll join us again for another episode in the future. As ever, you can subscribe in Spotify, YouTube, and all the usual places.